All right, let's jump right into this explainer and look at how one ancient Greek philosopher used pure, unadulterated logic to prove that our eyes and ears are basically lying to us all the time. I mean, when we look around, we see a world full of separate objects moving through space and time, right? It feels so incredibly obvious. But what if I told you that over 2,000 years ago, a guy named Zeno of Elea put together arguments so mathematically flawed that they proved motion and plurality are entirely impossible? Seriously, get ready to question your own reality. Picture this. You hold out your hand and drop a single tiny millet seed onto the ground. If I asked you, hey, did that make a sound? You'd probably look at me like I'm crazy and say no. It's way too light, way too small. To our human ears, it makes absolute silence. Well, this super simple observation actually sets up a fascinating thought experiment about the profound illusion of our senses. Zeno used this exact scenario to trap some of the absolutely greatest minds of his time. So let's look at exactly how he did it in Section 1, the illusion of motion. Now, we all assume motion and plurality, the existence of many different things, are just basic facts of human experience. But Zeno loved to pull the rug out from under those basic assumptions. He firmly believed our senses were a terrible judge of reality. In one famous instance, he trapped the philosopher Protagoras in this brilliant little dialogue. Zeno essentially says to Protagoras, if you drop a whole sack, a massive bushel of millet seeds, does it make a sound? And Protagoras naturally goes, yes, of course, it makes a huge crash. And that's when Zeno springs the trap. Shouldn't a single seed, which is just a specific mathematical fraction of that giant bushel, make a proportionate sound? Here is the crucial point he was making. If one seed equals pure silence, mathematically, multiplying that silence by 10,000 should still equal silence. 0 times 10,000 is, well, 0. How can a multiple of 0 suddenly create noise out of nowhere? Zeno argued that if a bushel makes a noise, the single seed absolutely must too. We just can't hear it. For him, this was rock-solid proof that our sensory perception of the world is just fundamentally flawed. We literally cannot trust our own ears. Which brings us to Section 2, defending Parmenides, the master's theory. You see, Zeno wasn't just some guy making up brain-melting puzzles to ruin dinner parties. He was fiercely loyal to his teacher, Parmenides, and he was on a mission to defend his master's incredibly controversial worldview against all the critics who thought it was ridiculous. Parmenides championed this theory called the One. He believed that reality is a single, unchanging, motionless, eternal whole. Because non-being or nothingness cannot logically exist, then empty space simply cannot exist. And without empty space to move into, well, movement is impossible. Therefore, all those many things we see and the motion we experience every day, pure illusions. People openly laughed at Parmenides for this. So Zeno wanted to show them that arguing against his master creates even bigger, way more ridiculous absurdities. Let this brilliant contradiction sink in for a second. Zeno proves that if you believe the world is made up of many separate things, you fall straight into a logical black hole. Think about it. If things are many, they must logically be finite in number, right? They are exactly as many as they are, no more, no less. But wait, if they are truly separate things, there have to be boundaries between them. And to separate those boundaries, there must be things between those things, and then things between those things, infinitely. So to follow that logic, the exact same reality must be both finite and infinite at the exact same time. It's just a complete logical collapse. All right, moving on to Section 3, the dialectic method. To lay these traps for his opponents, Zeno essentially invented a completely new way of arguing. And it was so wildly effective that it ended up shaping the course of scientific and philosophical history forever. Aristotle actually credited Zeno as the ultimate founder of this dialectic method. Instead of just stating his own beliefs and defending them, Zeno would temporarily accept his opponent's premise. He'd say, okay, sure, let's pretend you're right. Let's pretend motion and plurality are real. And then he would use their very own rules against them to show that their belief completely destroys itself. This brilliantly illustrates his primary engine of attack, the reductio ad absurdum, or reduction to absurdity. It works like this. He grants you your claim. Let's say your claim that you can walk across a room. Then he gently walks you down the logical path of what walking across a room actually requires mathematically. And then boom, he springs the trap, showing you that your belief results in total nonsense, proving the exact opposite must be true. Ergo, Parmenides must be right. Let's look at how he applies this in Section 4, Paradoxes of Infinity. This is where we get into his most famous, enduring traps, the ones that play directly on the concept of infinite space and mathematically dividing distance. If you think walking from point A to point B is a simple, everyday task, Zeno is about to absolutely ruin your day. Through his dichotomy, or bisection paradox, he uses the concept of mathematical infinity to prove that moving from one point to another is actually physically impossible. Let's walk through the steps of this bisection paradox. To reach any destination whatsoever, you obviously have to travel halfway there first, right? Makes sense. But to cross the remaining half, you must first cross half of that remaining distance, and then half of the new remainder. Step by step, because literally any distance can be divided in half, you have to complete an absolutely infinite number of tasks just to move a single inch. Because you can just infinitely divide the space, the remaining distance never ever truly reaches zero. Logically, if an infinite number of steps is required to complete any movement, movement can never actually finish. And honestly, by that exact same logic in reverse, you can't even take your very first step, because you'd have to cross a half step, and a quarter step, and an eighth step, infinitely backward. Motion can't begin, and it definitely can't end. But don't panic. There is a lifeline. Section 5, the atomist counterattack. I won't leave you completely trapped in Zeno's logic today. His paradoxes were so mathematically devastating that they practically broke Greek philosophy. They literally forced future thinkers to invent a massive scientific breakthrough just to escape the intellectual prison he built. See, Zeno argued that if physical things have extension in space and can be divided infinitely, they eventually get reduced to absolute zero. They get reduced to non-existence. Think about it. If you can chop matter in half forever, you eventually chop it into nothingness, taking the entire physical world down into the void with it. So to save reality itself, the atomists, guys like Leucippus and Democritus, found the one logical escape hatch. They proposed this radical new idea. They agreed with Zeno that space is mathematically divisible to infinity inside our minds, sure. But, they argued, out there in the real world, physically, matter essentially hits a hard, indivisible limit. It hits a foundational building block that simply cannot be cut any further. And they called this building block the atom. Later great thinkers like Epicurus had to heavily rely on and refine this atomic theory. They realized that without the concept of physically indivisible atoms, magnitudes that have a real size but cannot be split, there was just no way to protect the existence of reality, matter, and motion from Zeno's relentless, weaponized math. The atom was literally conceptualized to solve a logic puzzle. And that brings us to a final, totally mind-bending thought to take away from this explainer. Zeno showed us that human reason and mathematics can definitively prove that what our eyes and ears tell us is happening is impossible. So when pure logic and sensory reality collide so perfectly and so violently, which one is actually telling you the truth? Are you really moving right now, or is your mind just playing one massive trick on you? Keep questioning what you think you know, and thanks for exploring this with me today.